welcome back to another episode of the Bedroom Reno, where we are trying to go from this to this. And the last thing we have to do today is finish off this green accent wall, and then we will be wrapped up.
Give the wall a quick sand to make sure it's flat. Now, because there's going to be paneling, it's going to be tough to get in this groove. I'm going to cut in along this here, and that way the panel can go right over top of it. This is my first look. Almost all this will not be seamed.
So because basically what I'm doing is putting these green panels over top of this, and I have to paint inside the seams, for me to get the paint inside the seams and against the wall and have it look good was going to be really challenging. So I figured it'd be best to put in a straight line of basically cutting in down the wall, and that way that little green section would be easier to deal with later. Now, I don't actually know if it was worth it because I didn't do a great job of cutting in here, and I think my brush is essentially worn out at this point. And even trying to work on this, I'm used to cutting in going across a ceiling, right? But going up and down like this was almost a different skill that I don't really have yet. And so I don't know if this was actually worth the time in the long run to do the way I thought it would. And here's going to be the paneling I put on the wall. And you can see I did the exact same thing here. I didn't want to paint next to the baseboard, so I pre-painted them on the bottom here before tacking them on. Now, what I was essentially trying to do was add these panels to the wall, and there would be a seam on here, but essentially make it look like this horizontal pattern the entire way across. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm shimming it out to make sure it is level now, and that way the entire way down the wall, it's going to be level when I add the connection. The other thing I wanted to do was mark out where certain studs were and other kind of locations I need to be aware of, and essentially go down the room and add these panels one by one up the wall on the left side, and then I was going to come back and do the right side second. If I was going to do this again, I don't know if I would do the outlets in a different way, but I probably would do like a rough cutout and then use some kind of Dremel tool to mark where the outlets are going to be, because I spent a ton of time working on getting those locations right and looking clean, and I think there was just probably a better way to do it that I just wasn't aware of. But you can see every time here I had to kind of figure out the spacing, and then the spacing was an 1/8 inch where I basically used a paint shim to get it all to line up, and then I'd have to go back after that and mark out the outlet and then cut it and put it back and glue it in place, and it took a lot longer than I thought it would to get this wall up. Now with this wall, I actually made a bunch of mistakes. If I was going to do this again, I would do it completely different. But the first mistake was brad nails only. I should not have only used brad nails. I should have used construction adhesive too, like I have in the past. I didn't think I would need to here, but you will see in a bit how many issues not having the construction adhesive cost me. But essentially what I was trying to do is I used like a scarf joint here where you cut two pieces, both to 45 degrees, and then you kind of mash those seams together, and that way you can sand it flat. That's really common in carpentry when you're doing long runs of baseboards. It's called a scarf, and then you kind of put it together and you can sand it flush. But the way I did it here, it just did not look great, and putting the brad nails this close to the wall, it was really hard to get these filled, and even doing it on an angle like I did there, it was sloppy work, and it caused me a lot of headaches later down the road. Now this is where the headaches with this project really started to kick off. And the fact is, you have to have every tool for the right job, and although I own most of the tools for the job, I went back to the Dremel. I was using the Dremel so many different times for so many different projects on this bedroom. It just felt like the right thing to do next. And the reality is I tried to measure and mark and get these absolutely perfect, and there was really no need to. The old bit on here was smoking up. It was causing an issue, and when I pop it out, it was not exactly where I thought it would be, so I'd have to go back in and trim it and do all this little finicky work. And the reality is I own a router. I should have used a router with a flush trim bit to stick it in the middle of this, run it around the outside, and it would have been absolutely perfect, but I didn't do that. I did this crazy wonky thing here, and that was a pain. Now this is going to be a long part here, is going to be filling all these holes. So instead of trying to add 1 or 2 nails with a bunch of construction adhesive to kind of have the nails locked in place for a bit, I decided to only use brad nails, and along this corner here it was really hard to get them punched in and sealed and get that right. And then after that I had to go and fill every single nail hole that I made all the way down on this wall. So I basically punch it in if it needed to be punched in, and then go back and then fill it, and I did that. And you can see here, look how many nail holes I have to do. I don't even end up counting how many nails, but it would be ridiculous. You look back at a project and just think, what the hell were you doing? Why did you decide this was going to be the best approach? Well, that is what I'm telling myself right here. So along this seam, I knew on this scarf joint there would be a seam, and I'd have to come back and fill it in. even. But I went so overkill with the DAP on here. It was just way too much Drydex that I basically have to sand it all off. And that's what I have to do next. Yes, every single one of these white specks is a nail hole. And I came back with my orbital sander with a vacuum here and basically knocked every single one down. But looks are deceiving in this because it felt like I got them absolutely perfect. But as soon as you get the paint on here, you can see they are not perfect. And there was a bunch that I had to redo. Like I said, the next mistake I made, putting all these nails this close to the edge meant I could not get in with my orbital sander, and I had to 3D print a little block that I could use on my hand, get right up next to the wall, and then sand all these back. And once again, this step took forever, and when you think you actually have it perfect, you don't. You have to sand a little bit more, because it may look perfect from when you're just looking at it, but at that point, there's a lot more to take off. And this is where I made my biggest mistake, and that was going to be with this seam. Now, I thought leaving a little bit of this Drydex on the surface here was flat. It looked good, but when the wall actually gets finished, this seam looked terrible, and I spent a lot of time redoing it, and I redid it again, and I'm still not happy with it, and it's going to be a new sanding. So the reality is the amount of Drydex that should have been left here should have been little white spots, super minimal, almost not even used at all, but I was just determined that this was the best way to do it, and as soon as I got it looking semi-flat, I thought I was pretty much done. But the reality is, this looked terrible, and this is, a lot of this stuff was time, and time I can live with if I wasted some of my own time, but the fact that the end product still did not look good, that was part of the problem. Now, a bunch of time had passed. I did all the hand sanding of all the seams and all the Drydex, and I got it to where it was looking good. So I basically wiped it all down, thought this part was going to be completely over, and I was ready to paint. But next up is my second biggest mistake I made with this wall. And I'm not actually talking about this. This was a smart step here. So I tried something different. Normally, I have popcorn ceilings in my old house, and cutting into the popcorn is very tough. But I figured what I could do is I could use some caulk and basically give myself a straight line to work with here. So if I pushed caulk into the seam here, the caulk would go into where the popcorn would be, and it would make it easier for me to cut in a straight line. And this actually worked great. I'm happy with this. So this one wasn't a mistake.
All right, so I got all my painting stuff ready to go. I have my little tray to cut in, my brush and rollers ready. Just gotta open the paint, get started, get this done. So I'm already struggling with the little gaps. These gaps are very small. I have to use this.
Now, when I'm actually recording this, I forgot about this. Even though I went in and basically cut in, I didn't want to take the time to do the math to find out where these panels would be on the wall, and that way I could paint in behind. So I just thought, I'll wing it, I'll just fill in the paint later. But this is what I had to do. I had to use a tiny brush to go in this 1/8 inch groove along the entire thing to basically push the paint in there and then come back over it with the bigger brush to feather it out. And I had to do this for the entire wall. And I can't even tell you how long this took. Like, if I literally just would have put some paint on the wall to start, all these seams would have been invisible. But no, I decided to do it the slightly lazy way, and I did it like this. And this is mistake number one. It took forever. Now, after that, I kind of realized, hey, I'm up here, I'm on the ladder, I'm already doing all this other stuff. I might as well try and cut in the ceiling. And honestly, this went pretty well. Now that I had that layer of caulk down, it made it a lot easier to kind of cut in and pull a straight line. It's definitely tougher because the caulk is almost like a radius, where to cut in really nice and easy, you need like a nice crisp corner. So wasn't easy as it could have been, but doing any sort of cutting in next to popcorn is just really tough to do. And this is my first attempt at fixing some of these nail holes, and I can start to see that, yeah, it did not come out great. And here it is, the biggest mistake I made on this project, and that is going to be the fact that I did not prime this MDF first before putting it up. Not priming this MDF caused me two issues. Number one is going to be, it took way more coverage of paint than I wanted to get a nice even texture. I thought one coat, maybe two coats, but going over this raw MDF where some of it was sanded through that kind of top shiny surface meant it was a really uneven finish, and with this matte paint here, it just took forever to get this wall looking good. So if I was going to do this again, I would highly recommend you prime this thing first. And the other issue is only priming one of it. So you have to prime both sides of it. Because this paint is adding moisture to one side of the board, it caused a ton of warping and pulling away issues from the wall, where basically this beadboard, he doesn't know it yet, but as he works down the wall, all this is going to pull away and wave because you're adding a ton of moisture to one side and the other side is unsealed. So make sure if you're going to do this, prime all these pieces on both sides of it beforehand, and it'll give you an even finish, and especially with the construction adhesive, you won't have the pull away issue like I did.
So one coat down, so many more things to fill that I didn't expect. So I gotta go back. I did it this morning before work, that would be dry tonight. I gotta resand everything and do some patching. Do it all again, second night.
And right here is going to be the seam. Now in this night light, it does not look bad, but once I show you it in daylight, you can see it looked terrible and had to be redone. All right, here we go. Final coat of paint. So this is where I finally get all the pieces to come together. So I already went in, I filled all the nail holes. I added 1,000 more nails to make sure this thing stayed on the wall because I didn't use construction adhesive, and it's already sealed from that first coat of paint, and over all the seams and everything, I did another coat of paint. So that's all nice and sealed. I just got to do one even second final coat of paint, and this thing should be done looking mint. And at this point, it looked great, but you'll see. I'll do something else.
Okay, so we're almost done. We have to do some touch-up paint of the cream. I kind of nicked the wall over here a little bit. I nicked the wall over there a little bit. So, and an outlet switch I nicked as well. So touch-up paint, that's one. The second is going to be wall sconces. Got to hang up the wall sconces, put the outlets back, basically just reattach this electrical so I can turn that breaker back on, turn all that back on. And then the last one actually is over here that I can think of, and we're done. So this door I got as level as I could. I'm not sure if it's the door, because even the track is completely level, and so I'm not quite sure if I screwed something else up somewhere else. But when we close this door, it slowly creeps open to about here and stays, which is not great for someone trying to use the washroom and that doesn't know that that's going to be a thing, and then they're surprised. To solve that, on the rubber stopper up here, I'm going to put a magnet, and that way it'll magnet closed. 3 final things, some touch-up paint, calling it done.
You absolute idiot. You had it as close as it was going to be, and you thought you could go back in with a little bit of Drydex and touch up some nail holes. But guess what, buddy? This is matte paint, which means any touch-up you do here is going to look terrible when you touch it up. So yes, that is exactly what I did. I found a bunch of little nail holes and a bunch of little imperfections, and I touched them up again. But now, while that Drydex dries, let's get everything reattached for the electrical. Now here's one that's a little controversial for you. What do you do with your outlet covers? I've seen tons of people paint their outlet covers, and I actually think it looks terrible. If you have a light switch and you paint it, or you have an outlet and you paint it, no go, not a good idea. Pick a finish, metal or whatever finish you want and do it. Brass, black, white, whatever. Make it a part of the room. But these are junction boxes, and I thought in this instance it was okay to paint them. So yes, it's kind of a rule of mine, and I decided to go against it here. But at this point, I have all the power off, and it's now finally go back in and connect all my black hardware here. So I have black outlets, black cover plates. The second junction box there will be the one that's covered, and I just got to quickly wire all these in, and I can keep moving. Now this next step is actually kind of funny. So I had the forethought to put some paper on the wall because I'm attaching these sconces here, and I realized, hey, this matte paint is super finicky. So what I should do is tape some paper on the wall, and that way while I install all my sconces and do everything, the paper will protect the paint, and that way it can go there. Same thing here. I added all these switches. Here's my cover plate that I painted because this one's supposed to blend in. It's not technically part of the whole, design with this thing. So just painted the screw heads, screwed it on. That way it's going to kind of disappear. It's also behind a nightstand, so not a concern. But anyways, I'm losing track of what I was trying to talk about here. So the point is, I had the forethought to think, hey, this matte paint is tricky. And then I decided at the exact same time, hey, this matte paint is tricky. I'm going to go back in and try and spot repair. So that is what I'm doing here. I'm trying my best to keep all the dust down and keep it clean and just do little fixes here. And that way I can come back with a brush. And this honestly at this point looks pretty normal. Like when you're trying to fix stuff and do spot repairs, it does look a little weird, but then over time it'll kind of fill in and flatten out and kind of blend in. And that's what I was hoping would happen here, but it didn't. So then I tried to come back with the roller again and do another spot repair. And basically while I waited for dry, I made sure I was preoccupied and I did something else and did some other repairs on some spots where I knew it would work. Now before I show final B-roll shots, here's the cost breakdown. I had 2 sheets of 1/4-inch MDF cut up by Home Depot. Those were only about 20 bucks a piece, plus the gallon of paint that I had for this rosemary colorway. Brought it to $50. Total cost less than $100 to do this, versus board and batten was gonna be well over $1,000. Now enough of that, here's how the room looked before. It was purple, the trim was old, there were stains on the walls, and there was no light in this place. But now, here's what it looks like. Now, aside from having to float a new coat on that green wall to deal with those touch-ups, I am so happy with how this project turned out. The cream is bright, it's clean, it's inviting, there's way more natural light. Thanks for watching.